The letter arrived on black parchment, sealed with blood, red wax shaped like a crescent moon pierced by fangs. Evangeline Ashford stood in the drafty parlor of her late grandmother's cottage, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. The scent that rose from the paper was strange, expensive cologne mixed with something metallic, something ancient. The handwriting was immaculate, each letter formed with the precision of someone who had mastered penmanship centuries before typewriters existed. Miss Evangeline Ashford, your presence is required at Ravensmore Hall on the evening of the blood moon. This is not an invitation, it is an ancestral obligation. Your bloodline has been called to account. Come alone. Come before midnight, Lord Draven Blackthorn, Master of the Northern Coven. No explanation. No context. Just a command written as if her compliance was assumed, inevitable. Evangeline read it 3 times, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her grandmother had died 2 weeks ago, taking her secrets with her to the grave. The funeral had been small, attended only by Evangeline and the village priest who'd muttered prayers that sounded more like warnings. Before she'd passed, her grandmother had gripped Evangeline's wrist with surprising strength, her eyes fever bright. When they call for you, she'd whispered, go. You cannot outrun what's written in your blood. Evangeline had thought it was delirium. Now, staring at the summons, she understood it had been prophecy. The blood moon would rise tonight. Ravensmore Hall loomed against the October sky like a Gothic cathedral devoted to darkness itself. Evangeline's hired carriage stopped at the iron gates, the driver refusing to go further. His face had gone pale when she'd told him the destination. I'll wait here an hour, miss, he said, not meeting her eyes. No longer. Those who enter Ravensmore don't always come back unchanged. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the gates were already opening with a groan of ancient hinges, as if the estate itself had been waiting for her. The path to the hall wound through gardens gone wild, where roses bloomed black in the moonlight and marble statues watched with blind eyes. Evangeline clutched her cloak tighter, her breath misting in the unseasonable cold. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to run, but her feet carried her forward as if pulled by invisible strings. The front doors opened before she could knock. A woman stood in the threshold, beautiful in the way that poisonous flowers are beautiful, with porcelain skin and eyes like chips of winter ice. She wore a gown from another era, deep burgundy velvet that seemed to absorb the light. The mortal, she said, her voice carrying distaste. You're late. He's been restless. I don't understand why I'm here. Evangeline managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman's smile was sharp. You will. She led Evangeline through corridors lined with portraits of pale aristocrats, whose eyes seemed to follow their progress. Candelabras cast dancing shadows across walls hung with tapestries depicting scenes that made Evangeline's stomach turn, hunts where the prey wore human faces, feasts where goblets overflowed with something too dark to be wine. They entered a great hall that stole Evangeline's breath. The room soared upward into shadow, supported by columns carved with serpents and thorned vines. A massive chandelier of black crystal hung overhead, its candles burning with flames that gave off no warmth. And arranged throughout the space, watching her with predatory stillness, were dozens of figures dressed in elegant finery. Not one of them blinked. Not one of them breathed. Vampires. The word crashed through Evangeline's mind with the weight of undeniable truth. Her grandmother's warnings, the villagers' superstitions, the strange dreams that had plagued her for months, all of it crystallized into terrifying clarity. The Ashford girl has arrived, my lord, the woman announced. The assembled crowd parted, and Evangeline's gaze was drawn inexorably to the figure seated on a throne of black wood at the far end of the hall. Lord Draven Blackthorn rose with fluid grace that no mortal could possess. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that made him look like a living shadow given form. But it was his face that paralyzed her, impossibly beautiful, carved from marble and moonlight, with eyes that burned silver in the candlelight. Ancient eyes. Hungry eyes. He descended the dais steps, never breaking eye contact, and the crowd fell silent. Evangeline couldn't move. Couldn't think. She was prey caught in the gaze of the apex predator. And some primal part of her brain knew with absolute certainty that she was in the presence of something far older and more powerful than she could comprehend. He stopped 3 feet away, so close she could see the silver flecks in his eyes, could smell cedar and night, blooming jasmine and something darker beneath, copper and ice and eternity. Evangeline Ashford. His voice was midnight given sound, each syllable a caress and a threat. Do you know why you're here? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because, he said softly, dangerously, you are mine, Before she could process the words, he moved with inhuman speed. His hand caught her wrist, turning her palm upward. The crowd pressed closer, dozens of vampires watching with terrible intensity as Draven raised her hand to his mouth. "No," Evangeline gasped. His fangs pierced her wrist. The pain was sharp, bright, gone in an instant, replaced by something that shouldn't have felt like ecstasy but did. Evangeline's knees buckled, but Draven caught her, holding her upright as he drank. The world spun, tilted, reformed into something stranger and more terrible. Through their connected blood, she felt him, centuries of loneliness, an aching hunger that went beyond the physical, and beneath it all, recognition, as if he'd been searching for her across lifetimes. When he released her wrist, his lips were stained crimson. He turned to face his coven, still holding Evangeline against him with possessive strength. "She bears the Ashford mark," he announced, his voice carrying command that brooked no argument. "The covenant our ancestors forged is fulfilled. This mortal is under my protection." A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Shock, hunger, jealousy. "Let them all know," Draven growled, his arm tightening around Evangeline's waist. "She's mine." The last thing Evangeline saw before darkness claimed her was his silver eyes, burning with an intensity that promised her life would never be the same. Evangeline woke to silk against her skin and the scent of old roses. Her eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus in the dim light. She lay in a canopied bed draped with curtains of deep crimson velvet, their fabric so heavy they seemed to absorb sound itself. The room around her was vast, a bedchamber fit for forgotten royalty, with walls paneled in dark wood and a fireplace carved with gargoyles that watched her with stone eyes. Her wrist throbbed. Memory returned in a rush, the summons, the hall full of predators, Draven's fangs breaking her skin. She lifted her arm, examining the wound by the light of a single candelabra on the bedside table. 2 puncture marks marred the pale skin of her inner wrist, surrounded by a faint bruise that had already begun to fade to silver rather than the purple, yellow of normal healing. Wrong. Everything about this was wrong. "You're awake." Evangeline jerked upright, clutching the coverlet to her chest. Draven stood by the tall windows, his back to her as he gazed out at the night. He'd removed his formal coat, leaving him in a white shirt that seemed to glow against his dark hair. Even motionless, he radiated dangerous power. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "The East Wing. My private chambers." He turned to face her, and the candlelight caught his features. The sharp line of his jaw, the aristocratic nose, lips that could have been sculpted by a master artist obsessed with beauty and cruelty in equal measure. "You're safe here." "Safe." Evangeline's laugh was bitter. "You bit me in front of a room full of vampires. You claimed me like property." Something flickered across his expression, too fast to read, but she thought it might have been regret. "I saved your life. Been marking me. Been making you untouchable." Draven moved closer, his footsteps silent on the Persian carpet. "Do you understand what you are, Evangeline? What your bloodline represents?" She shook her head, pulling her knees up defensively. He sat at the edge of the bed, not close enough to touch, but near enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of him, the way his chest didn't rise with breath. 300 years ago, your ancestor made a covenant with mine. Eloise Ashford was a healer, gifted with blood that could cure even vampire venom. My father was dying from a hunter's poisoned blade. She saved him. In exchange for what? Evangeline whispered, though part of her already knew. Her bloodline service. 1 daughter from each generation, when called upon, would serve the Blackthorn Lord. His silver eyes held hers, ancient and weary. "You are the last Ashford daughter. The debt comes due with you." "That's insane. You can't hold me to some medieval contract. The magic doesn't care about modernity." Draven's voice was soft, almost gentle. "The covenant is written in blood and sealed with old power. When your grandmother died, it activated. Every vampire in the Northern Territories felt the pulse of it. They know an Ashford walks among us again." Evangeline's throat tightened. "What do they want with me?" "What they've always wanted. Your blood is rare. It carries properties that make it intoxicating to my kind. Addictive." His jaw clenched. "Without my protection, you would have been torn apart tonight. Drained dry by a dozen vampires fighting over the privilege." The image made her stomach turn. She looked down at the mark on her wrist, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. "So you marked me first. Made me yours so they couldn't touch me." "Yes. And now what?" "I'm your prisoner. Your blood slave." Draven's eyes flashed with something hot and dark. "You are under my protection, not my possession." "There is a difference." "As there?" She met his gaze challengingly, surprised by her own boldness. Perhaps it was shock. Perhaps it was the lingering effect of his bite, which had felt far more intimate than any touch she'd ever known. You summoned me. You marked me without my consent. You've brought me to this place and told me I can't leave because of some ancient debt I never agreed to. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if seeing something unexpected there. You're not afraid of me. I'm terrified of you, Evangeline corrected. But I won't let terror make me docile. Something like admiration softened his features. Your grandmother had that same fire. She came here once, decades ago, to negotiate the terms of the covenant. She bargained like a merchant queen. His expression grew distant. She made me promise that when the time came, I would treat her granddaughter with honor. That I would give you a choice. What choice? Draven stood, pacing to the fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows across his profile, highlighting the elegant bones of his face. The way his dark hair fell across his forehead. He looked like a painting come to life, some Renaissance master's vision of a fallen angel. Fulfill the covenant for 1 year, he said finally. Stay here under my protection. Your blood will satisfy the debt given freely in controlled amounts only to me. In return, you will want for nothing. You will be safe, educated in our ways, treated as an honored guest. And after the year, you may leave. The covenant will be fulfilled, the debt paid. You'll return to your mortal life with enough gold to live comfortably, and a compulsion placed upon you to forget what you've learned here. Evangeline absorbed this, her mind racing. And if I refuse? If I try to run? His silver eyes found hers again, and in them she saw centuries of loneliness, of hunger held barely in check, of something that looked almost like longing. Then the covenant will drag you back, again and again, until it's satisfied, and other vampires will hunt you, seeking to claim what they believe is theirs by ancient right. You'll spend your life running, hiding, never safe. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. 1 year, Evangeline said slowly, and you swear I'll be free to go. On my honor as Lord of the Northern Coven. He placed his hand over his heart in a gesture that seemed both formal and sincere. I swear it. She looked at the mark on her wrist. At this beautiful monster who'd saved her life by binding it to his own, and wondered if her grandmother had known this moment would come, if she'd prepared Evangeline for this without ever speaking the words aloud. Then I'll stay, she whispered. Draven's expression shifted, relief, hunger, and something deeper that she couldn't name. He crossed to her in 3 swift strides, taking her marked wrist in his hand with unexpected gentleness. Thank you, he murmured, and pressed his lips to the bite marks. The touch sent electricity racing through her veins, and Evangeline gasped at the intimacy of it. More than a kiss, less than a claiming. But something that bound them together in ways she was only beginning to understand. Outside, the blood moon hung heavy and red in the sky, watching over bargains made in darkness. Morning never came to Ravimore Hall. Evangeline discovered this on her first full day as Draven's. What? Ward? Captive? She wasn't sure what to call herself. She woke in the crimson, draped bed to find the windows still showing darkness, though her body insisted hours had passed. A servant had left clothing for her. A gown of deep emerald silk that fit perfectly, as if tailored for her body. The style was modern enough not to feel like a costume, yet elegant in a way her simple cottage dresses had never been. When she examined the windows more closely, she understood they were enchanted, showing eternal night to protect the hall's immortal residents from accidental sunlight. She was living in a world where dawn would never break. A knock at the door made her turn. The woman from last night entered without waiting for permission. The one with ice chip eyes and a smile like a blade. Lord Blackthorn requests your presence in the library, she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. I am Celeste, his second in command. I'll escort you. I can find my own way. No, Celeste interrupted, her voice sharp. You cannot. Ravimore has protections. Wards designed to confuse intruders. Without a guide, you'd wander the corridors until you collapsed from exhaustion. She tilted her head, studying Evangeline with predatory interest. Though watching you try would be entertaining. Evangeline lifted her chin. Then I suppose I should thank you for your guidance. Don't thank me. I'd have let you wander. Celeste turned on her heel. But Draven would be displeased, and his displeasure is unpleasant. They walked through corridors that seemed to shift and breathe, paintings watching their progress with eyes that followed too accurately. Evangeline tried to memorize the route, left at the portrait of the woman drowning in roses, right past the statue of the weeping angel, but suspected it wouldn't matter. This place operated on rules that defied mortal logic. How long have you served him? Evangeline asked, more to break the oppressive silence than from genuine curiosity. 2 centuries. Celeste's voice carried no warmth. I was turned during the French Revolution. Draven found me dying in the streets of Paris, my throat cut by revolutionaries who didn't approve of my family's title. She glanced back. He gave me eternity. I've served him ever since. Do you love him? The question escaped before Evangeline could stop it. Celeste froze mid-step, turning slowly. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Every vampire in this hall loves him in one way or another, she said softly. He is our Lord, our Creator, our anchor to sanity in this endless night. But what he feels in return, she smiled bitterly, he reserves for phantoms and lost causes, and now, apparently, for mortal girls with witch blood who smell like honeyed poison. Before Evangeline could respond, they arrived at an enormous door carved with scenes of the moon's faces. Celeste pushed it open, revealing a library that stole Evangeline's breath. The room spiraled upward through 3 levels, shelves upon shelves of books climbing toward a domed ceiling painted with constellations. Ladders on rails provided access to the higher reaches, and scattered throughout were reading alcoves with velvet chairs and tables inlaid with mother of pearl. The scent of old leather and parchment filled the air, mixed with something else, sandalwood and night, blooming jasmine. Draven stood at the center of it all, a book open in his hands. He'd changed into tailored black trousers and a deep burgundy waistcoat that made his pale skin seem to glow in the lamplight. When he looked up and saw her, something shifted in his expression, a softening that made him look almost human. Evangeline. Her name on his lips sent an unwanted shiver through her. Thank you, Celeste. That will be all. Celeste bowed stiffly and withdrew, but not before shooting Evangeline a look that promised future complications. You slept well? Draven asked, setting the book aside, as well as one can when kidnapped by vampires. A hint of amusement touched his mouth. You have a sharp tongue. I'm beginning to see why your grandmother spoke of you so fondly. You knew her. Evangeline moved closer, drawn despite herself to the warmth in his voice when he mentioned her grandmother. She visited every decade to ensure the covenant remained dormant. We would take tea in the conservatory. Yes, vampires can drink tea, though it provides no sustenance, and she would tell me about her life. Her garden, her granddaughter who preferred books to society balls. His silver eyes held hers. She loved you very much. Her greatest fear was that you'd be afraid here. Emotion tightened Evangeline's throat. I am afraid. I know. He gestured to the library surrounding them. That's why I brought you here. Your grandmother told me you devoured books the way my kind devours blood. I thought, perhaps this might make your imprisonment feel less like a cage. Evangeline turned slowly, taking in the thousands of volumes. She saw titles in languages she recognized and many she didn't: Latin, Greek, what might have been Sanskrit. Books on history, philosophy, poetry, and an entire section devoted to what looked like grimoires and occult texts. This is your collection? She asked, accumulated over 600 years. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his body. I was a scholar before I was turned. A second son with no inheritance, no prospects beyond the church. I spent my mortal years in monastery libraries, copying texts and dreaming of distant lands I'd never see. She looked up at him, seeing him differently. What happened? A vampire found me. His voice went distant. She was beautiful and terrible, and she promised me eternity among all the books I could ever desire. I was 23 and fool enough to believe immortality was a gift rather than a curse. Do you regret it? Draven was quiet for a long moment. I regret the price, every life I've taken to sustain this existence. Every sunrise I'll never see again. Every person I've loved and watched grow old and die while I remain frozen in time. He turned to face her fully. But I don't regret the knowledge I've gained. The languages I've learned. The history I've witnessed firsthand. You speak of it like a fair trade. Nothing about vampirism is fair. His hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. Which is why I'll give you something I was never given: choice. Knowledge. Understanding of what you've been bound to. Why? Evangeline whispered. Why do you care whether I understand? His silver eyes burned into hers. Because when I tasted your blood, I felt something I haven't felt in 200 years. What? Hope. The word hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Evangeline's heart hammered against her ribs, and she knew with terrible certainty, that this vampire lord was far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Not because he might drain her dry, but because he made her want to understand the monster who looked at her like she was salvation itself. Come. Draven said, stepping back before the moment could deepen further. I'll teach you about the world you've entered. Starting with the most important lesson, which is... His smile was sad and ancient. How to survive in a court of immortal predators who would kill for a single drop of your blood. Draven's lessons began that evening in the library's most secluded alcove. He'd arranged 2 chairs facing each other beside a table set with crystal decanters filled with dark liquid, wine, Evangeline hoped, though she suspected otherwise. Between them lay an ancient tome, its leather cover cracked with age, the title written in silver ink that seemed to shimmer. The Covenant of Blood and Bone. Before you can navigate this world, you must understand its rules. Draven said, settling into his chair with inhuman grace. The covenant that binds us is older than nations, older than most of the languages spoken today. It was written when magic still flowed freely through the world. Evangeline sat across from him, acutely aware of how close they were, how the lamplight caught the sharp planes of his face. My grandmother never told me anything about magic. She was protecting you. Knowledge of the old ways draws attention from things best left undisturbed. He opened the tome, revealing pages covered in illuminated script and diagrams that looked like arcane anatomy. Your bloodline descends from healers who made pacts with the immortal races. Vampires weren't the only ones they served. There were agreements with fae, with demons, with creatures that have no names in modern tongues. A chill ran through her. What happened to the others? Most died out. The Ashfords were unique. Your blood adapted, evolved to become universally potent. A vampire drinking from you experiences not just sustenance, but euphoria, clarity. Some even claim it temporarily restores memories of their mortal lives. His eyes met hers. That's why you're so dangerous. Every vampire who knows of your existence will crave you. Then why didn't you drain me in the hall? You could have claimed my blood entirely. Draven's jaw tightened. Because I'm not an animal, despite what you might think. And because... He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. When I tasted you, I saw things. Felt things I'd thought lost forever. Like what? Sunlight. The word came out reverent aching. For a moment, I remembered what warmth felt like on my skin. The smell of summer grass. My mother's garden in full bloom. He looked away. I hadn't thought of those things in centuries. Your blood brought them back. Evangeline's hand unconsciously went to the marks on her wrist, which had healed to faint silver scars that caught the light strangely. Is that what the Covenant demands? That I provide these memories? The Covenant demands blood freely given at the phases of the moon. New quarter, full and dark. He turned pages in the tome, showing her illustrations of rituals performed under different lunar cycles. Each phase carries different properties. The new moon blood grants prophetic dreams. The full moon enhances strength and healing. The dark moon. He hesitated. What does dark moon blood do? It creates bonds. His voice dropped lower. Subtle, deep connections between vampire and donor. It's the most dangerous phase, the most intimate. Some vampires and their mortal donors have become so entwined during dark moon rituals that they share thoughts, emotions, even pain. The implications made Evangeline's mouth go dry. And you expect me to, not expect, never expect. Draven closed the book carefully. Everything between us will be negotiated, consented to. I won't take what isn't offered freely. That's my vow to you. She studied him, this ancient creature who spoke of consent and free, while admitting he'd marked her to save her life. The contradiction should have made her angry. Instead, she found herself curious about the man he'd been before immortality had claimed him. Tell me about your mortal life, she said impulsively. Not as a lord, not as a vampire. Tell me about the scholar who loved books. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that looked almost like gratitude. I was born in 1423 in a village so small it no longer exists on any map. My father was a minor knight. My older brother inherited everything. I was sent to a monastery at 12 because there was nothing else for a second son without land or prospects. Did you mind? Not at all. A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. The monastery had a library, small by these standards, but to me it was paradise. I learned Latin, Greek, philosophy. I copied manuscripts until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned. The abbot said I had a gift for languages. The smile faded. He also said I asked too many questions. That curiosity was the devil's gateway. He wasn't entirely wrong, Evangeline said softly. It was curiosity that got you turned. Yes. Draven's eyes grew distant. She came to the monastery looking for shelter from a storm. Lady Catherine de Valois, beautiful beyond reason, speaking French like poetry. She asked for books on ancient history, and I was assigned to assist her. We talked for hours. She knew things that weren't in any text, spoke of empires I'd only read about as if she'd witnessed them herself. Because she'd lived through them. His hand curled into a fist. On the third night, she asked if I feared death. I said I feared dying without having truly lived, without seeing the world beyond monastery walls, without understanding all the mysteries in those books. She smiled and said she could give me eternity to pursue knowledge. And you agreed. I begged for it. Bitterness edged his voice. She turned me in the monastery chapel, at the foot of the altar. Said it was poetic, a scholar becoming immortal in a place devoted to eternal life. Then she left me to navigate vampirism alone, to feed or starve, to learn control or become a monster. Evangeline's chest tightened with unexpected sympathy. She abandoned you. Vampires rarely keep their fledglings. We're too dangerous in the early years, feral, unpredictable. Most die within the first decade, either from hunters or from losing control and drawing too much attention. He met her eyes again. I survived through books. Through forcing myself to remember the scholar I'd been, even as the hunger tried to turn me into a beast. Is that why you built this? She gestured to the library around them. I built this so I'd never forget that I was human once. That I chose this curse. His gaze intensified. And so that perhaps someday, I might find someone who'd help me remember what it felt like to be alive. The air between them grew charged, heavy with implication. Evangeline's pulse quickened, and she saw Draven's eyes track the flutter of her heartbeat at her throat. Your blood calls to me, he said quietly. Even now, I can hear it singing through your veins, smell the sweetness of it. But I'll wait until you're ready to fulfill the Covenant's first requirement. When is the next moon phase? Tomorrow night. The quarter moon. He stood, offering his hand to help her rise. Rest. Prepare yourself, and know that I'll take only what's necessary, nothing more. His cold fingers closed around hers. And Evangeline felt that electric connection again, the sense that their fates had been woven together long before either of them had been born. Tomorrow night. She would bleed for him willingly. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt inevitable. The ritual chamber existed beneath Ravenmore Hall, carved from living stone that remembered older gods. Evangeline descended the spiral stairs with Draven at her side, each step taking her deeper into the earth, where the air grew thick with incense and ancient power. Torches lined the walls, their flames burning blue, white instead of orange, casting everything in ghostly illumination. The Covenant must be honored in sacred space. Draven explained, his voice echoing off stone. Blood given freely in mundane rooms has no power, but here, where the boundary between worlds grows thin, the magic recognizes intention. They emerged into a circular chamber dominated by a stone altar carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, suggesting dimensions the human mind wasn't meant to comprehend. The ceiling stretched upward into darkness, open to the night sky where the quarter moon hung like a silver sickle. Evangeline's breath caught. It's beautiful, it's dangerous. Draven moved to the altar, lighting candles arranged in a perfect circle. Once we begin, the ritual cannot be interrupted. The magic will demand its due, and if I lose control. He turned to face her, silver eyes blazing with intensity. Promise me that if something goes wrong, you'll run. Don't look back. Don't try to save me. What could go wrong? Your blood may be more potent than either of us realizes. The euphoria I felt before was just a taste, a stolen drop in the heat of claiming you. This will be measured, intentional, intimate. He gestured to the altar. The magic will bind us closer with each ritual. By the year's end, we'll be connected in ways that even I don't fully understand. Fear and something dangerously close to curiosity warred in Evangeline's chest. And you've never done this before. Never had a covenant donor. Never. He produced a silver chalice from a niche in the wall, its surface engraved with the phases of the moon. My father completed the ritual 3 times before my birth. The last Ashford donor died in his arms during the dark moon phase. The bond grew so strong that her heart simply stopped, unable to sustain both her life and the connection between them. Evangeline swallowed hard. That's not particularly reassuring. I won't let that happen to you. Draven's voice carried absolute conviction. I've spent 3 centuries studying blood magic, learning control that my father never possessed. You'll be safe. I swear it. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to trust him, this monster who looked at her like she was something precious rather than just sustenance. What do I need to do? She asked. Draven guided her to stand before the altar, positioning her so the moonlight fell directly across her face. Give me your wrist. The same one I marked before. The ritual requires continuity. Evangeline extended her arm, watching as he cradled it with unexpected gentleness. His fingers traced the silver scars where his fangs had pierced her skin, and even that light touch sent electricity racing through her nerves. The quarter moon governs clarity and decision, he murmured, his breath cold against her wrist. Blood given now will grant me enhanced perception, the ability to sense threats before they materialize. In return, you'll dream true, visions of possible futures that may help you navigate the dangers ahead. That sounds useful. It's also terrifying. You'll see paths you might take, choices that could lead to salvation or destruction. Some mortals go mad from quarter moon visions. His eyes met hers. Are you certain you want to proceed? Evangeline thought of her grandmother, who'd negotiated this covenant knowing what it would mean for her bloodline. Thought of the debt written in magic older than memory. But mostly, she thought of Draven's face when he'd spoken of sunlight, the aching loss in his voice, the way her blood had given him back something he'd thought forever lost. I'm certain, she said. Then we begin. Draven lifted the chalice in his free hand, speaking words in a language that predated Latin, predated anything Evangeline had ever heard. The symbols on the altar began to glow with pale light, and the air grew heavy with power that made her skin prickle. He raised her wrist to his mouth, pausing at the last moment. Thank you, he whispered against her skin. For choosing this. For trusting me. Then his fangs pierced her flesh. The pain was sharper this time, more focused, not the chaotic claiming of their first encounter, but a deliberate taking that felt ritualistic, sacred. Evangeline gasped as his mouth sealed over the wounds, his tongue lapping at the blood that welled up dark and rich in the moonlight. But it was the sensation that followed that stole her breath entirely. She felt him drinking, felt her blood flowing from her body into his, and with it came a connection that transcended the physical. His emotions crashed through her, hunger, yes, but beneath it a loneliness so profound it made her heart ache. Centuries of isolation. Decades of watching everyone he'd ever cared for turn to dust. The crushing weight of immortality spent searching for something to make existence bearable. And then the euphoria hit him, and through their connection, it hit her too. Evangeline's knees buckled, but Draven caught her, holding her upright as he continued to drink. She saw flashes of his memories, the monastery library bathed in candlelight, his mother's face laughing in a garden full of roses. The moment Catherine had turned him in ecstasy had warred with agony as his mortal life drained away. She saw herself through his eyes, standing in the great hall surrounded by vampires, her chin lifted in defiance, mortality blazing around her like a flame that refused to be extinguished. Beautiful, brave, impossibly precious. When he finally released her wrist, catching the last drops of blood in the chalice, Evangeline was trembling. Draven's eyes had gone pure silver, glowing in the darkness, and his fangs were still extended, sharp and white and deadly. Evangeline, he breathed, and her name had never sounded like that before, like prayer, like worship, like damnation and salvation combined. He raised the chalice to his lips and drank the remainder of her blood, and the magic in the chamber flared bright enough to blind. Evangeline felt something settle into place inside her chest, clicking like a lock finding its key. The bond, the covenant, the beginning of an entanglement that would define the next year of her life. When the light faded, Draven stood transformed. He moved with predatory grace to stand before her, reaching up to cup her face with hands that no longer felt quite so cold. I can see everything, he whispered, awe coloring his voice. Every vampire within 100 miles, every threat, every possible danger. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. And I can feel you, your heartbeat, your fear, your curiosity. What have we done? Evangeline asked, though she already knew. We've begun something that cannot be undone. Outside, the quarter moon watched over them, a silver witness to bonds forged in blood and darkness. The visions came that night, fierce and unrelenting. Evangeline thrashed in the crimson-draped bed, caught between waking and sleeping, her mind flooded with images that felt more real than memory. She saw herself standing in the great hall, but the assembled vampires were ash and bone scattered across marble floors. She saw Draven kneeling before her, his silver eyes dim with approaching death, whispering words she couldn't hear. She saw herself transformed, pale and perfect and terrible, fangs extended as she fed from a throat she recognized as her own grandmother's. She woke screaming. Evangeline. Draven was there instantly, materializing from the shadows as if he'd been waiting. He caught her shoulders, his cold hands anchoring her to reality. Breathe. You're safe. It's the quarter moon visions. They always feel real, but they're only possibilities. Her voice broke. I saw myself as one of you, a vampire, and I was killing. He pulled her against his chest, and she was too shaken to resist. His hand stroked her hair with surprising gentleness. The visions show every possible path, including the ones you'd never choose. Your mind is learning to navigate futures that haven't been written yet. It's overwhelming at first. Evangeline clutched his shirt, her fingers twisting in the fine fabric. Through the bond forged in the ritual chamber, she could feel his presence in her mind now, a dark anchor that somehow made the chaos of visions recede. His emotions bled through with concern, protectiveness, and beneath it all, a hunger that never fully went away. How long will this last? She asked against his shoulder. 3 nights. By the 4th. You'll have learned to control it, to see the visions without being consumed by them. He pulled back enough to look at her face, brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. I should have warned you more clearly. I'm sorry. You said it would be terrifying. I just didn't believe you. She managed a shaky laugh. Do all the rituals come with side effects? Something flickered across his expression. Each phase affects you differently. The new moon will grant you prophetic dreams, but gentler ones. The full moon. He hesitated. The full moon will make you feel invincible, intoxicated by the power flowing through the bond. You'll need to be careful not to take foolish risks. And the dark moon. His jaw tightened. We'll discuss that when the time comes. For now, you need rest. He moved to leave, but Evangeline's hand shot out, catching his wrist. Stay. The word escaped before she could stop it. Please. I don't want to be alone with those visions. Draven went very still. Evangeline, I'm not sure that's wise. The bond is still fresh, still volatile. Being close to you right now when your blood is still singing in my veins. His eyes flashed silver. I have control, but I'm not made of stone. I'm not asking you to lie beside me. Just stay in the room. Read one of your books. Talk to me until I fall asleep. She looked up at him, surprised by her own boldness. I trust you. You shouldn't. But he settled into the chair beside her bed anyway, summoning a book from thin air with a gesture that suggested centuries of practiced magic. But I'll stay. Evangeline lay back against the pillows, watching him in the candlelight. He'd removed his coat, his white shirt open at the collar, revealing the elegant column of his throat. She wondered if vampires had pulses, if anything beat beneath that pale skin, or if death had stopped his heart the night Catherine had turned him. Read to me. She asked softly. He glanced up, surprise evident in his features. What would you like to hear? Something from your mortal life. Something you loved before the monastery, before the turning. Draven was quiet for a moment, then set aside the book he'd summoned and spoke from memory, his voice taking on a rhythm that suggested ancient poetry. In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan, earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Christina Rossetti. Evangeline murmured, recognizing the verses. But that was written centuries after you were turned. I've continued to love poetry, he said with a small smile. Though you're right, I should choose something from my mortal years. Let me think. He closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of memory. One that April with his sharer's suit. The drought of March hath pursed to the root. Chaucer. Evangeline breathed. You knew the Canterbury Tales when they were new. I copied them by hand in the monastery scriptorium. His eyes opened, distant with remembering. The abbot thought them too worldly, too concerned with earthly pleasures and sins, but I loved the humanity in them, the way Chaucer captured every kind of person, from knight to miller to wife of Bath. They were alive on the page. Do you miss it? Being human. Every moment of every century. The confession came out raw, unguarded. I miss warmth, the taste of food. The simple pleasure of falling asleep naturally, without having to force my body into dormancy as the sun rises. I miss. He looked at her, something vulnerable in his silver eyes. I miss the possibility of change. Humans grow, evolve, become new versions of themselves. I'm frozen at 23, eternally the same scholar who made a foolish choice in a monastery chapel. You're not the same, Evangeline said softly. You've learned languages, accumulated knowledge, built this library. You've changed in ways that matter. Perhaps. He reached out, his cold fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture that felt achingly intimate. Or perhaps I've just been waiting 600 years for someone to remind me what it feels like to want to change. The bond between them pulsed with shared emotion. His loneliness meeting her compassion, his hunger tempered by her trust. Evangeline felt the dangerous pull of it, the way their connection made her want to close the distance between them, to offer comfort that went beyond words. "Tell me another story," she whispered, fighting the urge. "Tell me about the world before it became what it is now." And he did. Draven spoke through the night, his voice weaving tales of medieval villages and monastery bells, of copying manuscripts by candlelight and debating philosophy with monks who'd been dead for centuries. He spoke until Evangeline's breathing deepened, until the quarter-moon visions receded into gentler dreams. But he didn't leave. He stayed in that chair, watching over her with the devotion of a guardian and the intensity of something far more dangerous, a vampire lord who'd found, in a mortal girl's blood, the first taste of redemption he'd known in 600 years of darkness. And in her dreams, Evangeline saw a different vision. Herself and Draven standing together beneath a sky where dawn finally broke, his hand warm in hers, both of them changed by the covenant in ways neither had anticipated. Whether that future was possible or merely fantasy, she couldn't yet tell. But she found herself hoping it was real. The summons came 3 nights after the quarter-moon ritual, delivered by Celeste with barely concealed satisfaction. "The coven demands an audience," she announced, sweeping into the library where Evangeline had been studying ancient texts under Draven's tutelage. "They want to see the Ashford girl, to verify that she's worthy of the Lord's protection." Draven's hand stilled on the page he'd been translating. "I've already claimed her." "There's nothing to verify. They believe you've been compromised." Celeste's smile was sharp. "That the girl's blood has addled your judgment. Lady Morgana is particularly insistent. She says the covenant should have been managed collectively, not monopolized by one vampire, even if he is our lord." Evangeline watched Draven's expression darken, his civilized mask slipping to reveal the predator beneath. "Morgana oversteps. Morgana speaks for half the coven. And you know the laws. If 3 elders challenge your judgment, you must submit to tribunal." Celeste's chip eyes gleamed. "They've already gathered in the Great Hall. They're waiting." The walk to the hall felt like a march to execution. Draven kept Evangeline close, his hand resting possessively at the small of her back. Through their bond, she felt his tension, the careful control he maintained over the fury simmering beneath his surface. "What will they do to me?" she whispered. "Nothing, if I have any say in it." His voice was cold steel. "But be prepared. They'll try to intimidate you, test whether you're strong enough to survive in our world. Show no fear, even if you're terrified." "I thought you said they couldn't touch me because you'd marked me." "They can't feed from you or harm you physically. But vampires have other weapons, words, illusions, psychological torture refined over centuries." His jaw clenched. "Stay close to me. Don't answer questions directed at you unless I permit it." The Great Hall had been transformed since the night of her arrival. Now it resembled a courtroom from a nightmare, with vampires arranged in a semicircle around a raised dais, where 3 figures sat in ornate chairs that might as well have been thrones. The center figure was a woman of devastating beauty, dark hair cascading over shoulders draped in crimson silk, eyes like polished obsidian, lips curved in a smile that promised cruelty. Lady Morgana, Evangeline guessed. To her right sat an elderly-looking vampire with silver hair and the bearing of ancient nobility. To her left, a younger male with golden eyes and the lean build of a born hunter. Behind them, the coven watched, dozens of immortal predators whose collective gaze made Evangeline's skin crawl. "Lord Blackthorn." Morgana's voice dripped with false courtesy. "How kind of you to join us. And you've brought your little mortal pet." Draven's hand tightened fractionally at Evangeline's back. "Mind your tongue, Morgana. She is my covenant donor, bound by ancient law. You will show her respect." "Respect." Morgana laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "For a human who'll be dust in the blink of an eye. You ask too much." The silver-haired vampire spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Lord Blackthorn, I am Elder Thaddeus. We mean no disrespect, but concerns have been raised about your judgment regarding this arrangement. The covenant was meant to provide blood to strengthen the entire coven, not to be hoarded by a single vampire. My father's agreement was with the Blackthorn bloodline specifically." Draven countered. "The magic recognizes me as the rightful recipient. Any attempt to circumvent that would break the covenant entirely." "Convenient interpretation," the golden-eyed vampire drawled. "I am Lucian, and I say the girl should be tested. Let us see if her blood is truly as potent as legend claims, or if you're simply drunk on the novelty of fresh mortal flesh." Evangeline felt Draven's rage spike through their bond, felt him preparing to unleash violence that would shatter the fragile politics, keeping this gathering civil. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "Test me, then. The hall went silent, every eye fixed on her with predatory intensity. Evangeline, Draven's warning came too late. If you question whether I'm worthy, she continued, lifting her chin, then surely there's some trial I can undertake. Some proof I can offer beyond Lord Blackthorn's word. Morgana's smile widened, showing a hint of fang. How delightfully brave. Or foolish, I haven't decided which. She rose from her seat, descending the days with fluid grace. Very well, little mortal. We shall test you. She produced a crystal vial from the folds of her dress, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside was dark, viscous, clearly blood. This contains vampire venom mixed with the blood of a covenant donor from 2 centuries past, the last Ashford to serve a Blackthorn. If you're truly of their line, if your blood carries their power, you should be able to consume this without dying. That's insane, Draven snarled, moving to intercept. Vampire venom is poison to mortals. It will kill her. Not if she's genuine. Morgana's eyes glittered with malice. The Ashford bloodline adapted to neutralize our venom, that's what made them valuable. But if she's merely human with a famous surname, if there's been dilution of the bloodline over generations, she shrugged elegantly. Well, then you've been protecting a fraud, my lord. Evangeline's heart hammered, but through the bond she felt something else, Draven's absolute certainty that she would survive this, mixed with fury that she was being forced to prove herself at all. I'll do it, she said. No, Draven caught her wrist. I forbid it. She met his silver eyes, seeing the fear there beneath the anger. You told me to show no weakness. What message does it send if I refuse their test? What message does it send if you die in front of them? His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. I cannot lose you, Evangeline. Not when I've only just found you. The confession sent warmth flooding through her chest, but she stood firm. You won't lose me. You said yourself, the Ashford blood is powerful. Trust in that. Trust in the covenant. For a long moment he simply stared at her, ancient eyes searching mortal ones. Then slowly, he released her wrist and stepped back. If she dies, he said coldly, addressing Morgana, I will tear your heart from your chest and watch you burn to ash. This I vow before the assembled coven. Morgana's smile never wavered. Noted, my lord. Now then, she approached Evangeline, offering the vial. Drink deep, little Ashford. Let's see if you're worthy of the name you bear. Evangeline took the vial with steady hands, though every instinct screamed at her to run. The liquid inside looked like death crystallized. She uncorked it, raised it to her lips, and drank. The venom hit her system like liquid fire. Evangeline's vision went white, her knees buckling as agony tore through her veins. She heard Draven roar. Felt him catch her as she fell, but the pain drowned out everything else. Through the bond, she felt his terror, his rage, his desperate prayer that she would survive. And deep within her blood, something ancient stirred and answered. The fire in Evangeline's veins transformed into something else. Something that felt like power unfurling from a place she hadn't known existed. Her eyes snapped open, glowing with an ethereal silver light that mirrored Draven's. The assembled coven gasped collectively as she rose from where she'd collapsed, standing on her own despite Draven's attempts to support her. The venom coursed through her bloodstream, but instead of destroying her, it was being metabolized, transformed, neutralized by something inherent in her very cells. Impossible. Morgana breathed, her composure finally cracking. The venom should have killed me. Evangeline's voice came out stronger than before, resonant with power she didn't understand. You underestimated what the Ashford bloodline truly is. Through the bond, she felt Draven's shock and relief warring with something else, pride. His hand remained at her back, steadying, but no longer holding her up. Elder Thaddeus leaned forward, his ancient eyes wide with something approaching reverence. The legends were true. The Ashford blood doesn't just resist vampire venom, it converts it. Uses it as fuel for their own latent magic. Latent magic. Evangeline turned to him, the silver glow in her eyes beginning to fade but not disappearing entirely. I don't understand. Your ancestors were more than healers, child. Thaddeus stood, approaching with careful respect now rather than dismissive judgment. They were blood mages, wielders of a magic so rare that most believed the art lost. Vampire venom in mortal veins is death, but in an Ashford's veins, he gestured to her. It becomes a catalyst, an awakening. Evangeline looked down at her hands, which seemed to shimmer with barely visible energy. She could feel her heartbeat, but it felt different now, stronger, synchronized with some cosmic rhythm she'd never noticed before. And through the bond with Draven, she could sense not just his emotions but his very essence, the ancient magic that sustained his immortal existence. What have I become? she whispered. You've become what you always were, Draven said softly, his hand moving to cup her face. You've simply awakened to it. Morgana recovered her composure, though fury darkened her features. This changes nothing. Awakened or not, she's still mortal, still vulnerable. 1 year of service doesn't. It changes everything. Lucian interrupted, rising from his seat with an expression of calculated interest. An awakened blood mage hasn't walked among us in 3 centuries. The last one could heal mortal wounds with a touch, could sense vampire presence from miles away, could even temporarily suppress our hunger. His golden eyes fixed on Evangeline with predatory curiosity. The question is, what can this one do? Before anyone could respond, Evangeline felt a surge of sensation through the bond, danger, close and immediate. Her head snapped toward the hall's entrance, her newly awakened senses screaming warning. Someone's coming, she said. Multiple someones. And they mean violence. Draven's expression went deadly. How do you? The doors exploded inward in a shower of splinters and holy fire. Vampire hunters poured through the breach, a dozen warriors in black leather marked with silver crosses, wielding weapons that gleamed with blessed silver and ancient magic. At their heads strode a woman with steel, gray hair and eyes like chips of frozen sky, a sword in each hand that burned with righteous fire. Isabella Harker. Draven snarled, positioning himself in front of Evangeline. You dare breach Ravenmoor. I dare whatever is necessary to end the abomination your kind represents. The hunter's voice rang with zealous conviction. We've tracked the Ashford girl here, felt the surge of blood magic from your cursed rituals. We won't allow you to corrupt her bloodline further. The coven erupted into defensive positions, vampires snarling and hissing as they prepared to defend their territory. But Isabella's attention fixed on Evangeline, visible behind Draven's protective stance. Miss Ashford, Isabella called. Your grandmother sent us a letter before she died, begging us to save you from this fate. Come with us now, and we'll break whatever unholy bonds these creatures have placed upon you. Evangeline's mind reeled. Her grandmother had contacted vampire hunters. Had she truly been that afraid of the Covenant's price? She's lying, Draven growled. Your grandmother negotiated the Covenant's terms herself. She would never, wouldn't she? Isabella pressed forward, her hunters fanning out. Or did she realize too late what price you'd exact from her only granddaughter? Blood slavery, corruption of her magical heritage, transformation into one of you parasites. I'm not enslaved, Evangeline heard herself say, stepping out from behind Draven despite his protective instinct. The Covenant was made freely. I chose to honor it. Chosen. Isabella's laugh was bitter. Child, you've been marked by a vampire lord. His venom runs through your veins even now, I can smell it. You're not choosing anything. You're being consumed? The words struck something deep in Evangeline's chest, doubt she'd been trying to ignore. Was her growing connection to Draven real, or was it magical compulsion disguised as emotion? The bond between them pulsed with his presence, but how could she know what was genuine feeling and what was covenant-induced attachment? Through their link, she felt Draven's pain at her moment of doubt, sharp as any blade. Evangeline, he said quietly, and the use of her name rather than any possessive term cut through the chaos. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. The Covenant binds you to provide blood, not to remain imprisoned. If these hunters can offer you safety, freedom from this world. He was giving her a choice. A real one, despite the Coven's judgment, despite the danger surrounding them, despite everything at stake. Evangeline looked at Isabella and her righteous warriors, offering salvation from darkness. Then she looked at Draven, ancient, dangerous, lonely beyond measure. But who'd shown her kindness, taught her patience, stayed by her bedside when nightmares claimed her. She thought of the library filled with centuries of accumulated knowledge. The ritual chamber where magic sang in her blood. The glimpse she'd seen of Draven's mortal self, that scholar who'd loved poetry and dreamed of understanding the world's mysteries. She thought of how her awakened blood had responded not with fear, but with recognition when exposed to vampire venom. This was her heritage, her power, her choice. I'm not leaving, Evangeline said, and as she spoke, silver light flared around her hands. This is where I belong. Isabella's expression hardened. Then you're as lost as the creatures who've corrupted you. Hunters purged this nest. The hall erupted into violence. Vampires clashed with hunters in a brutal dance of fang and blessed blade. Draven moved to defend Evangeline, but she found she didn't need defending. Her awakened senses warned her of every strike before it landed, her blood singing with power she was only beginning to understand. When a hunter lunged toward her with a silver dagger, she raised her hand instinctively. Light burst from her palm, and the hunter froze mid-strike, paralyzed by magic Evangeline hadn't known she possessed. Extraordinary. Thaddeus breathed from somewhere in the chaos. She's manifesting already, but Evangeline's attention was on Draven, who fought with lethal grace against 3 hunters at once, protecting not just himself but her, always positioning himself between her and the greatest threats. Through their bond, she felt his determination she would survive this, even if he didn't. That thought galvanized her like nothing else could. Enough. Evangeline's voice rang with command she didn't know she had, amplified by blood magic that made even the hunters pause. This ends now. Power radiated from her in waves. Silver light that pushed back both vampire and hunter alike. In that moment, standing at the center of the great hall with her blood singing and her magic awakened, Evangeline understood what she truly was. Not victim, not prey, not even just a covenant donor. She was a blood mage, and the game had changed. The silver light that emanated from Evangeline held everyone frozen, vampire and hunter alike suspended in a stasis born of blood magic more ancient than their conflicts. Isabella Harker stared at her with dawning horror. What have they made you into? They didn't make me into anything. Evangeline's voice trembled with the power coursing through her veins. This is what I always was. What my bloodline has always been. You came here to save me from corruption, but you don't understand. The Ashfords were never meant to hunt vampires. We were meant to balance them. Through the bond, she felt Draven's astonishment, his wonder at the woman standing before him blazing with inherited magic. The connection between them thrummed like a living thing, and she could sense his desire to reach for her, tempered by uncertainty about whether she'd welcome his touch. Balance. Isabella spat the word. There is no balance with parasites who feed on human blood. There is only predator and prey, and you've chosen to stand with the predators. I've chosen to stand with truth. Evangeline's grip on the magic wavered, exhaustion beginning to creep through the adrenaline. My grandmother knew what the covenant meant. She prepared me for this in ways I didn't understand. The books she left me, the stories she told, the herbs she taught me to recognize. She wasn't afraid of vampires. She was afraid I'd reject my heritage out of ignorance. The light began to fade, and with it, the paralysis holding the combatants. But something had shifted in the room's energy. The hunters who'd come for righteous slaughter now looked uncertain. Even Isabella's conviction seemed shaken. Your grandmother was a good woman, the hunter leader said quietly. She healed my sister once when no doctor could help. I owed her a debt. When she wrote to me, speaking of concerns about the covenant, about wanting to ensure you had a choice. Isabella's hands tightened on her swords. I thought I was honoring that debt by coming here. You honored it by giving me the chance to prove I'm here by choice. Evangeline swayed, and instantly Draven was there, his arm supporting her. She leaned into his cold strength gratefully. But I don't need rescuing. I need time to understand what I'm becoming. Elder Thaddeus moved forward carefully, his ancient eyes studying Evangeline with scholarly intensity. The awakening is incomplete. What you demonstrated just now was instinct, raw power without refinement. To truly master blood magic, you'll need training. Months of it, perhaps years. Training from vampires. Isabella's voice dripped skepticism. Training from someone who understands the magic that flows through her veins. Thaddeus countered. We have texts in this library older than your hunter order, grimoires written by Ashford blood mages who documented their craft. If Miss Evangeline desires to learn, she will learn, Draven said, his voice brooking no argument. Under my protection, with access to every resource Ravimore possesses. He looked down at Evangeline. If that's what you want. It was the second time tonight he'd offered her choice rather than command. The contrast between his possessive claiming of her in front of the coven and his willingness to let her decide her own path struck something deep in Evangeline's chest. I want to understand what I am, she said. I want to master this power so I'm not a danger to myself or others. And, she met his silver eyes, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared emotion. I want to complete the covenant. Not because magic compels me, but because I choose it? She heard the sharp intake of breath from several vampires. Even Draven looked stunned. You realize what that means? He asked softly. The full moon ritual is in 6 days. After that comes the dark moon, which will bind us in ways that can never be undone. If you have any doubts, I have 1,000 doubts. Evangeline interrupted, but none of them are about wanting to stay. Morgana's voice cut through the moment like a blade. How touching. The mortal girl has developed feelings for her captor. Stockholm Syndrome disguised as magical destiny. Evangeline turned to face the beautiful vampire, exhaustion making her bold. Is that what you tell yourself? That every emotion between mortals and vampires must be false? Maybe that's why you're so bitter, Lady Morgana. You've forgotten what genuine connection feels like. The hall went silent. No one spoke to Morgana that way, especially not mortals. But instead of rage, something like respect flickered across the vampire's features. Perhaps, she said slowly, I have underestimated you, little Ashford. You have teeth after all. She turned to Draven. Keep her then, with my blessing. But know this, if she becomes a threat to this coven, blood mage or not, I will end her myself. She won't be a threat, Draven said. She'll be an asset. Once trained, she could tip the balance of power among all vampire territories. Lucian finished, his golden eyes gleaming. An awakened blood mage allied with the Northern Coven would make us formidable indeed. Other lords will notice. Some will want to negotiate. Others, he smiled without humor. Others will want her dead. The weight of that reality settled over Evangeline like a shroud. By awakening her magic, by choosing to stand with Draven, she'd painted a target on her back that would never fade. Isabella seemed to reach the same conclusion. You've made yourself a piece in games that have been played for centuries, she said, not unkindly. I cannot protect you from what's coming. But, she hesitated, then reached into her coat and produced a small silver pendant on a chain. Your grandmother wanted you to have this. She said if you ever truly needed sanctuary, any hunter bearing an Ashford token would offer aid, no questions asked. Evangeline took the pendant with trembling fingers. It was warm from Isabella's body heat, engraved with symbols she recognized from her grandmother's journals, wards against compulsion, against magical manipulation. Thank you, she whispered. Isabella nodded curtly. Hunters, we're leaving. The Ashford girl has made her choice. We'll respect it. She pointed her sword at Draven. But if I hear she's been harmed, if her will has been compromised, I will return with forces that will reduce Ravimore to ash. Do we understand each other? Perfectly. Draven's smile was all fangs. Though you should know, anyone who threatens her will have to go through me first. The hunters withdrew, leaving destruction in their wake but no bodies. The coven began to disperse, vampires murmuring among themselves about blood mages and shifting alliances and the danger of keeping a mortal with such power in their midst. Finally, only Draven and Evangeline remained in the great hall, standing amid the wreckage. You defended me, she said quietly. Offer to let me go, even though it would have broken the covenant. I told you, you're not my possession. His hand came up to cradle her face with infinite gentleness. But I would very much like to be yours. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Evangeline saw past the vampire lord to the lonely scholar beneath, the man who'd spent 6 centuries searching for connection and found it in the blood of a mortal girl who tasted like salvation. She rose on her toes and kissed him. His lips were cold, but they warmed against hers. His arms came around her, crushing her close as if she might vanish. Through their bond, emotions crashed together, his longing meeting her acceptance, his hunger tempered by her trust, his eternal darkness brightened by her mortal flame. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, though only one of them needed air. 6 days until the full moon, Evangeline whispered against his mouth, and then the dark moon after that. Are you prepared for what comes next? Draven's silver eyes blazed. With you, I'm prepared for anything. The 6 days passed in a fever dream of study and transformation. Draven became her devoted teacher, guiding her through ancient grimoires written in languages that shifted on the page until her awakened blood learned to read them. She discovered that blood magic wasn't just about power. It was about understanding the vital force that connected all living things, the sacred current that vampires had learned to steal, and she had inherited the ability to channel. Elder Thaddeus joined their sessions, his centuries of accumulated knowledge proving invaluable. He taught her to sense vampire presence, to distinguish between fledgling and ancient, to feel the subtle differences in their hunger and intent. Your blood calls to us, he explained one evening in the library, his voice carrying the patience of the very old. But with training, you can learn to dampen that call, to shield yourself so you're not constantly broadcasting temptation to every vampire within miles. Evangeline practiced the technique, pulling her magical signature inward until even Draven, standing 3 feet away, looked startled by how thoroughly she'd disappeared from his senses. Remarkable, Thaddeus murmured. It took the last Ashford blood mage decades to master that skill. You've done it in less than a week, but the rapid progression came with a price. Each night, Evangeline fell into bed exhausted, her body aching from channeling power it wasn't fully prepared to handle. And each night, Draven was there, reading to her, talking until she drifted into sleep, his presence through the bond a constant anchor. They didn't kiss again, though the tension between them built like a storm waiting to break. Now, standing in the ritual chamber beneath the full moon's silver light, Evangeline felt that storm gathering force. The full moon ritual is different, Draven said, his voice tight with controlled hunger. He looked devastating in the candlelight, all sharp edges and barely restrained predator. It will flood you with power, make you feel invincible. You'll need to resist the urge to do something reckless. Like what? Like offering me more blood than the ritual requires. Like asking me to turn you. His eyes burned into hers. The full moon makes mortals crave transformation, makes them believe immortality is transcendence rather than curse. You must promise me you won't ask for that. Not tonight. The intensity in his voice told her this warning came from experience, from watching other mortals make choices under the full moon's influence that they couldn't take back. I promise, she said softly. I'm not ready for that choice. Maybe I never will be. Something like relief and disappointment warred in his expression. Then let's begin. The ritual unfolded like a dance they'd choreographed in dreams. Draven spoke the ancient words, his voice resonating with power that made the symbols on the altar glow white-hot. Evangeline stood bathed in moonlight, feeling her blood respond to the celestial pull, to the magic that recognized this night as sacred. When Draven raised her wrist to his mouth, she was ready for the pierce of fangs, for the rush of sensation as he drank. But what she wasn't prepared for was the magnitude of the full moon's effect. Power exploded through her veins like wildfire. Evangeline gasped as her senses expanded beyond anything she'd experienced before. She could feel every vampire in Ravenmore Hall, their hunger, their age, their individual essences distinct as fingerprints. Beyond that, she sensed mortal life in the village miles away, heartbeats pulsing in rhythm with her own. The earth itself seemed to breathe beneath her feet, ancient and alive. Through the bond with Draven, she felt his experience of her blood. Euphoria magnified tenfold by the full moon's power, memories cascading through him with crystal clarity. She saw his mother's face young and laughing, saw the monastery garden in full summer bloom, saw himself as a mortal boy racing through fields of wildflowers with his brother. And then she felt his grief, the weight of 600 years of loss, every person he'd ever loved reduced to dust while he remained frozen in time. The loneliness was a chasm so deep it threatened to swallow her whole. No, she thought fiercely through their connection. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. Draven released her wrist with a sound between a groan and a prayer. His eyes blazed pure silver, no white visible, and when he spoke his voice was rough with emotion and hunger barely leashed. Evangeline, you need to step back. The full moon, it's too much. I can barely. But she didn't step back. The power singing through her blood made her fearless, reckless exactly as he'd warned. She reached up to cup his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. I trust you, she said. Even now. Even like this. You shouldn't. His hands gripped her waist, whether to push her away or pull her closer, she couldn't tell. God help me. I want things I have no right to want. Like what? The question came out breathless, daring. Like this. He kissed her with 600 years of hunger behind it, and the full moon's power amplified everything. Evangeline felt herself lifted, pressed against the ancient altar, Draven's cold body a shock against her overheated skin. His mouth moved from her lips to her throat, and she felt the scrape of fangs against her pulse point, not breaking skin, but close enough to make her gasp. Through the bond, their emotions tangled into something singular. His desire meeting hers, his darkness illuminated by her light, two souls reaching for each other across the void between mortal and immortal. But Draven pulled back with visible effort, breathing hard despite not needing air. No, not like this. Not when the moon's influence might make you do things you'll regret come dawn. I won't regret this, Evangeline insisted. But even as she spoke, she felt the truth of his words. The power coursing through her made everything feel heightened, possible, when in reality she stood in a vampire's arms offering herself with an abandon that should have terrified her. Ask me again after the dark moon, Draven said, pressing his forehead against hers. When the ritual cycle is complete, and you can be certain your choices are truly your own. If you still want me, then I'll believe it's real. The discipline that must have required, given what she could feel through their bond, made Evangeline love him a little more. Love. The word crashed through her mind with the force of revelation. She loved him, this monster, this scholar, this lonely immortal who treated her like something precious rather than prey. The dark moon is in 2 weeks, she whispered. 14 days. His smile was equal parts anticipation and apprehension. Can you wait that long? Can you? His laugh was dark velvet. I've waited 600 years. What's 14 more days? But they both knew those 14 days would be the longest of their existence. Mortal and immortal alike stretched on a rack of wanding, bound by a covenant that was becoming so much more than either had anticipated. Outside, the full moon reached its zenith, bathing Ravenmoor in silver fire, and in the ritual chamber below, a vampire lord and a blood mage stood locked in an embrace that was both promise and torment. Counting down the nights until the dark moon would force them to acknowledge what they'd been circling since the moment he'd marked her as his. The dark moon rose on a night when even the stars seemed to hold their breath. 14 days had passed in exquisite torture. Evangeline had continued her training, mastering blood magic that made even Elder Thaddeus marvel. She could heal minor wounds with a touch now, could sense vampire approach from remarkable distances, could weave protective wards that shimmered like spider silk in moonlight. But none of those accomplishments mattered as much as the choice she faced tonight. The dark moon ritual was the final seal on the covenant, the binding that would tie her soul to Draven's in ways that transcended blood and magic. Thaddeus had explained it bluntly. Once completed, they would share thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations across any distance. Some donors had lived full mortal lives connected to their vampire lords, the bond stretching but never breaking even across continents. Others had chosen transformation, unable to bear the thought of aging, while their bonded remained eternally young. You could still refuse, Celeste had said that morning, her ice chip eyes studying Evangeline with something almost like respect. The covenant would be incomplete, but your year of service would still count. You could leave with your life and your magic intact. But Evangeline knew she wouldn't refuse. Couldn't refuse. Not when her heart had already made the choice her mind was still catching up to. Now she stood in the ritual chamber one final time, dressed in white silk that seemed to glow in the darkness. Draven waited by the altar, and the sight of him stole her breath as it always did, beautiful and terrible and hers in ways that defied mortal logic. "Are you certain?" he asked, and she heard the vulnerability beneath the formal question. He'd asked her this every day for 2 weeks, giving her endless opportunities to reconsider. "I've never been more certain of anything." Evangeline crossed to him, taking his cold hands in her warm ones. "I love you, Draven. Not because the covenant compels me, not because your blood creates false feelings. I love the scholar who spent 600 years accumulating knowledge. I love the Lord who gave me choices when he could have demanded obedience. I love the man who stayed by my bedside when nightmares claimed me." His breath caught, unnecessary but habitual. "I love you," he said, and the words sounded like they'd been torn from somewhere deep inside him. "I've loved you since the moment I tasted your blood and felt hope for the first time in 2 centuries. I've loved you through every lesson, every conversation, every night I've watched you sleep and marveled that someone so alive chose to stay in my darkness." Tears spilled down Evangeline's cheeks. "Then let's finish this. Bind me to you completely. Make me yours in every way that matters. The dark moon creates permanent bonds," Draven warned, even as his hands tightened on hers. "If you die, I'll feel it. If you suffer, I'll share that suffering. And when your mortal life ends," his voice broke, "when you grow old and I remain young, it will destroy me to watch. Then don't watch me die." Evangeline's words came out steady, certain. "When my time comes, when I've lived the full mortal life I'm meant to have, turn me. Let me spend eternity by your side." Draven went very still. "You're asking. I'm not asking now. Not while the dark moon might influence my judgment. But someday, decades from now, when I've experienced everything mortality has to offer, yes, I want forever with you." She smiled through her tears. "Just not tonight." Relief and longing warred in his expression. "Decades," he repeated. "You'd make me wait decades. You said you've waited 600 years. What's a few more?" His laugh was shaky, joyous. "A few more decades of watching you live then, of experiencing the world through your mortal eyes, of loving you in all the ways I've dreamed." He pulled her close. "I accept your terms, my brilliant blood mage." The ritual began with words older than civilization, Draven's voice weaving magic that made the air shimmer. Evangeline felt her power rise to meet his, blood magic and vampire essence intertwining like lovers finally coming together after lifetimes apart. When he bit her wrist this time, the sensation was transcendent. not pain. Not pleasure, but something beyond both, a joining so complete that she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Through the bond, she felt everything his love like a tidal wave. His hunger satisfied not just by blood, but by her willing surrender, his soul recognizing hers as the missing piece he'd searched centuries to find. And then the dark moon's magic completed the binding, and Evangeline gasped as their consciousness merged. She saw herself through his eyes, mortal and magnificent, blazing with life and magic, beautiful in ways she'd never recognized. She felt his absolute conviction that she was worth any price, any sacrifice, any eternity of loneliness that had led him to this moment. And he felt her love in return, uncomplicated, freely given, seeing the monster and the man and cherishing both, felt her determination to live fully, to master her magic, to spend decades experiencing mortality before choosing immortality on her own terms. The connection settled into something sustainable, no longer overwhelming but ever present, a silver thread linking their souls across any distance. When Draven released her wrist, his eyes were wet with tears that vampires shouldn't be able to cry. "I feel you," he whispered in awe. "Your heartbeat, your joy, your absolute certainty that this is right. And I feel you," Evangeline said, touching his face. 600 years of loneliness ending tonight. Hope replacing despair. Love where there was only hunger. They stood together in the ritual chamber, bound by magic and choice, and a covenant that had transformed from obligation into devotion. Outside, the dark moon watched over them, ancient witness to a vampire lord and a blood mage who'd found in each other what both had been seeking: salvation. Partnership. "Home, what happens now?" Evangeline asked. Draven smiled. A real smile full of warmth she'd taught him to feel again. "Now we have time, decades of it. You'll master your magic, experience the world, live the mortal life you deserve, and I'll be beside you every step of the way, grateful for each moment. And when my time comes?" "When your time comes," he said, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that sealed promises spoken and unspoken. "I'll give you eternity. We'll walk through centuries together, my brilliant, beloved blood mage. Forever won't be long enough." Evangeline kissed him back, tasting forever on his cold lips, feeling their souls intertwined through magic that would never fade. She'd come to Ravenmoor a frightened mortal girl, summoned by ancient debt. She was leaving the ritual chamber as something far more powerful, a blood mage bound by love rather than obligation, with decades of mortal life ahead and eternity waiting beyond. The covenant was complete. But their story was just beginning, and in the darkness above, the stars finally released their held breath, shining down on a vampire lord and his chosen mate. Two souls who'd found in blood and magic and choice something worth more than immortality itself. They'd found each other,